Good evening. Welcome to episode 45 of Duval Rundown. My name's Gus Logue. Tonight I'm joined by Hacker and later on Mia, who is in Las Vegas right now, to break down what we just saw from the Jaguars' 19-14 loss in week 16 rather. The Jags have two more games left, and right now they are projected to pick second overall in the 2025 NFL draft after only the New York Giants, who are assumingly going to take a quarterback. And so the Travis Hunter sweepstakes are alive and well again. Mia and I both predicted a Jaguars win on Thursday's show. Hacker, do you think the Jaguars were going to win, or is this a surprising result to you?
I mean, nothing surprising, Gus, with this team. They're awful. But the Raiders are also awful, right? I mean, those are two bad teams going at it. It was a situation. Alexa, stop. Even Alexa's mad about the Jaguars right now. It was two bad teams going at it. Two teams that committed penalty after penalty. What was that when the third quarter? 4 straight plays where there were penalties. I mean, it was Keystone Cop stuff out there. Am I surprised Jacksonville lost the game? No. Did I think they were going to win? Yeah, I probably did. But it doesn't surprise me that Aiden O'Connell and the Las Vegas Raiders end a 10-game losing streak by beating the Jaguars today.
Yeah, 10 games is pretty nuts. There was 15 total penalties in this game, 8 for the Jags and 7 for the Raiders. But each team only got 1 first down via penalty. So that kind of goes to show just how sloppy this game really was. It was, maybe the worst quarterback matchup we've seen so far this season, which is really saying something because we've seen from some ugly ones. But I thought this might have been Mac Jones's worst game of his year, because he had a pretty bad one against the Vikings in his first start, but that's a pretty tough draw to go up against Brian Flores' defense in your first start of the season. And so he's settled in a lot more over the past couple of weeks, found a groove, especially with Brian Thomas and Brenton Strange last week. But this week, Brian Thomas continues to do his thing, but Brenton Strange coughed up a fumble and seemed to be benched after that. Same goes with Tank Bigsby. And so really just not really anyone showing up beyond number 7 is what feels like it's been happening for the greater at least a month now, and definitely tonight as well. But at least we've got Thomas Jr., right?
Well, yeah, I mean, and you know how I feel about it. I've mentioned it every night last week on Hacker After Dark. Young guys perform well. Ultimately, you lose the game. That was a perfect scenario for me. Brian Thomas Jr. was superb. I thought Mason Smith had his best game as a Jaguar. Like what Parker Washington did. Bigsby fumbled, but I thought he also was good other than that. Strange didn't have a great game, but I thought for the most part the young guys played well. You find a way to lose the game in the fourth quarter, which helps you in April. It does, no matter what you say. Oh, I want to win games. Well, that's great. Reality is losing games helps you in April. And it also helps you, I think, get rid of the status quo, meaning GM, head coach, here in a couple of weeks. At least that's the hope. Real quick, though, Gus, you've been watching football for years. I've been watching football for years. And I get it. It's a lot easier for me in my living room to talk about this other than when, 300-pound guys are wanting to rip my head off in real time. 4th and 11, game on the line. You throw a 6-yard check down pass to Dearness Johnson. Man, Mac understood the assignment today, didn't he? He understood the draft positioning in April, I guess. I mean, what on earth was that?
It also reminded me of the Raiders' old quarterback, Derek Carr, just because I feel like he had several infamous moments where he checked down or threw the ball out of bounds on critical 4th down, fourth quarter plays. And so, yeah, that was pretty underwhelming, but not even that surprising. I saw a view that Lauren Brooks actually tweeted out from her seats at the game. And it looks like Mac's first read was Brian Thomas running kind of an out on the right side. And then once Mac saw that the flat defender was playing Brian Thomas, then Mac just tried to make a quick decision and get the ball out into a player's hands. And so I do understand at least, it's not like he was standing around in the pocket for 5 seconds and then checked it down, because then there would have been virtually no chance of Dearness Johnson picking up the first down. But yeah, I'm honestly not even trying to defend Mac Jones. It was just an awful play, really bad game. He had several bad misses. I feel like, throughout the game, but especially in the first quarter, there was just one drive where he just had 3 in a row that were just not even catchable. One of them was to Josh Reynolds, who I believe has not yet caught his first pass as a Jaguar. Maybe he had one in garbage time last week, but man, the Mac Jones show is pretty rough. Robert Lamison said earlier on YouTube, give CJ a shot. Tired of watching Mac start. Yeah, I miss watching Trevor Lawrence a lot, especially watching other good quarterbacks throughout the day. Drake May was doing really well during this Jags game, but I mean, can you have anything? Do you have anything that you're kind of like looking forward to seeing other than Brian Thomas Jr. for the rest of the year? Because one guy that I was thinking about was Trey Prince for this game, but it seemed like he only really got run when Tyson Campbell went out for a couple plays with a shoulder injury, but then Campbell ended up returning, and so like really didn't see much of anything from Trey Prince, even though we did see some stuff from young guys on the defensive line.
Yeah, no, it'll be the same guys next week. Mason Smith, right? Can he build off of this? Again, it's relative because Mason Smith hadn't done very much coming into today, but today was clearly his best game as a
Mm-hmm.
Jaguar. He looked like a second round pick today, which was awesome. But yeah, I mean, it's all about Brian Thomas Jr. A little bit of Parker Washington, Tank Bigsby, Brenton Strange, the young guys. That's who I want to see. Next week is going to be so interesting because, look, people can say all the right things, right? The players are going to want to win the game, and the coaches are going to want to win the game. And now that we've gotten rid of that, we're contractually obligated to say that, Gus, right? Players aren't going to tank, and the coaches aren't going to tank. All right, wonderful. That's great. I'm talking to the Jaguar fans. You play the Tennessee Titans next week. They're 3-12. You are 3-12. They need Shador Sanders and or Cam Ward. All right. You did, and I'm not saying Shador Sanders or Cam Ward's Andrew Luck, but the Titans are not going to want to win that game next week. At least their fan base and media has no desire to win that game. They want a quarterback. So I really don't want the Jaguars to give them their potential franchise quarterback in the top 2 or 3 picks. It's an important game for the Jags to lose next week, and we'll get more into it as the week goes on. But, oh, Hacker wants the team to lose. Yeah, next week I probably do because a loss to Tennessee hurts them. If Tennessee beats you, that hurts them to try to get their quarterback of the future. But that's a separate issue for later on this week.
No, I think it's fair to like look ahead that way. I mean, we've already been kind of doing it in recent weeks, but especially now with them being lined up for a top 3 overall pick, it's kind of the bigger just fallouts from this season are going to be in terms of wins and losses and how the Jags and other teams are kind of set up for the future, as opposed to any small details that come out like within each of these games. But one of the small details, again, is Brian Thomas Jr. I just want to give him one more shout out. He became the third rookie since, I don't know, 2020 at least, or I think 2015 at least, to have at least 1,000 yards receiving and 9 receiving touchdowns as a rookie, joining only Jamar Chase and A.J. Brown. Before this game, he was tied with Jamar for second in terms of consecutive 75-yard receiving games. He also had 8 total on the year, which was tied for second with Jamar, behind only Justin Jefferson. And so even if it was a busted coverage that he scored a 62-yarder on, and even if he has been getting a lot of opportunities, mostly because of injury, as Doug Peterson and Press Taylor said during this past week, like he's also getting all this volume because he's shown that he can handle it. And so, yeah, just all the same things that we've been saying of just this guy is easily the best player on the team, and he's going to be someone to really look forward to watching for years to come. But I guess in these next 2 weeks too. Next week will be pretty interesting between Brian Thomas and Calvin Ridley. They did have one kind of sort of matchup earlier in the year, but I feel like Ridley was pretty quiet. I think he had about 5 catches for 40 yards or something, but he did score a touchdown today against the Colts. And so that'll be an interesting matchup to watch. Off the top of your head, are there any other like in-game matchups that you think could be good for next week against the Titans, or even the season finale against the Colts in Week 18?
I mean, not really. You're playing out the stretch at this point. I mean, they battle, right? They try, but this is the NFL, and wins are the only thing that matters. And what is it now? Of their losses, 9 times they've lost 11 games, or they've played 11 games, right? They played 11 games that have been decided by 7 points or less, and they've lost 9 of those. I mean, Gus, that's wild, man. To
Mm-hmm.
lose 9 games by 7 points or less. And today was another one. You're right there, 19-14. You have a chance with the ball right on midfield, and you just simply can't get it done. Um, the next two games are what they are, right? I guess it's good it's division games. That'll add a little intrigue. It's good that Calvin Ridley makes his return to Jacksonville. That'll add a little intrigue. But come on, man. At the end of the day, next Sunday's matchup is combined records of 6-24. I mean, 6-24 is what the Titans and the Jags are. They are both awful. And I was talking to some of my Titans buddies up in Nashville that cover the team. Like I said, they have zero desire to beat the Jaguars next week. They're all in on replacing Will Levis with the next thing up there, whether that's Shador Sanders or Cam Ward. So we'll see what happens. I think Jacksonville's probably better than Tennessee. I mean, they went to Nashville and beat them. I don't know why they wouldn't beat them at home, although Jacksonville doesn't win at home either. So Jacksonville's won like 3 home games in the last 2 years here at Everbank Stadium, or seemingly 3 home games in like the last 20 appearances or whatever it is, last 20 regular season games. So it's a bad product right now. You're playing out the stretch. But again, the bright spots today, Brian Thomas Jr. was a huge bright spot. Mason Smith was a huge bright spot.
Yeah.
Parker Washington gets overshadowed by Brian Thomas, but I thought Parker did some nice things as well. But aside from that, Gus, it was just 2 bad teams and what looked like the equivalent of a preseason game at times.
I will say Andrew Wingard probably deserves a shout out too. Darnell Savage exited the game because he was in concussion protocol, and Dewey stepped up and made a couple of nice plays on the ball. And so he was obviously out for much of at least the first 6 or so weeks to start the season with an injury that he had in training camp. And so the safety room, or just the secondary in general, I feel like is a big position to watch through the rest of the season in terms of like decision making for the future and which guys are going to be able to stay and keep their jobs and which guys might become upgraded from. But yeah, Dewey Wingard definitely always been a kind of core special teams guy, but I wonder if he's going to be a little bit more of more of a defensive role in these last 2 weeks and potentially going forward. One thing I'm interested in asking Mia as soon as she hops on in here is what she thinks about Doug Peterson's job security, specifically for the next 24 hours, because after the Detroit game and then even after last week, there has been some rumblings and some whispers that maybe like this is finally the time that Doug Peterson would be let go. And as Mia broke down on the Thursday show, the reason that Shad Khan would potentially decide to do it after today's game, as opposed to just waiting another 2 weeks until the end of the season, is that as Mia said, like Shad could say, "Happy holidays, Doug. Go and enjoy the time with your family," which would be nice, I guess. But really, it's that you can start interviewing head coaches right now, and you can't interview any coaches who are currently hired by another or employed by another team. You can get a head start in terms of interviewing guys like a Mike Vrabel, who is not currently with the team, or he might actually be a defensive assistant somewhere. So I'm not exactly sure how that works. But yeah, long story short, the Jaguars could get a head start on their coaching search. And so do you think that's a possibility in these next 24 hours that Doug Peterson could be let go, or would that surprise you and you think it's not going to come for another 2 weeks?
It wouldn't surprise me. It would flabbergast me if it didn't come on Black Monday. Would it surprise me if it happened tomorrow? No, it wouldn't. To me, though, Gus, I don't know about you. Doug Peterson's not really the issue anymore. I think it's almost a foregone conclusion that he's gone, which is
Right.
weird, right? Because the whole thing's weird. Like, you watch these press conferences during the week. He's like, yeah, we want to get the young guys in there to get them ready for next year. Well, nobody thinks you're going to be here next year. All right. I know that he's coaching like he's going to be here next year, but just listening to him talk about getting the young guys some experience for the future, nobody expects you to be here after the next 2 weeks. I think the bigger question's bulky. And look, I got family in town that are Jaguar fans. I'll have more family coming in, friends. I don't know how Shad Khan's going to justify it to people if he keeps Trent Baalke. Whether it's us in the media, whether it's people have just wised up or waking up, whatever the verbiage is you want to use. I mean, the narrative's out there about how bad they've been with Shad as the owner on the field. I mean, after 210 regular season games, today was the 210th. They have 63 wins and 147 losses. And Shad Khan's getting a lot of blame on that now. I don't know why he didn't 2, 3, 4 years ago, but he is now. And if you keep Trent Baalke, and the status quo continues, again, I don't know how you justify that to this fan base. And maybe you don't need to justify it. Maybe you think you don't need to make a statement. You don't need to say anything, which I think would be an interesting tact to use if they keep Balky. But again, get back to your original point. I think Peterson's a foregone conclusion. He's gone either tomorrow or 2 weeks from tomorrow. I think the much more interesting question is Balky, and the much more interesting question for us on 1010XL is how are we going to even comprehend talking about that to Jaguar fans if Trent Baalke is retained in 2025? Because they are going to be pissed. There is no doubt about that.
Yeah, another indictment potentially would just be if the Jaguars do end up with the first overall pick, they'd be the first NFL team ever to pick first overall 3 times in a 5-year span. So definitely pretty rough. I think that the Peterson conversation is really only interesting because of how it relates to Baalke. Like if he ends up getting fired and they do get a head start on the coaching search, then great. But really, I think it would almost be a bad thing to see Peterson fired before the end of the season, or at least before Baalke, because then I think there's a good chance that Baalke, or a better chance that Baalke would be staying if Peterson was fired. Because I don't think they would fire one of them now and then wait another 2 weeks to fire the other one. And I kind of assume that Trent Baalke's job is just safe until the end of the season. And so I think that so long as Doug Peterson is employed, that maybe means that there's a better chance that he and Baalke are going to go down at the same time. But I'm right there with you. Like, even with 2 games remaining, I feel like it's kind of Groundhog Day. And I'm not sure, like, what new things to tell Jaguars fans, especially as it relates to Trent Baalke. And so it'll definitely be a really long offseason if he does get retained. Because even if they hire Ben Johnson or Liam Cohen or a hot shot head coach, assuming that either one of those or anyone would want to work with Trent Baalke, it's just going to be a sour feeling knowing that you have this guy in the building who was the result of you getting the first overall pick 3 times in 5 years, or potentially if that does happen. But yeah, I don't know. It's gonna be a long off season if that does happen.
I don't think Ben Johnson or Liam Cohen come here if Trent Baalke's a GM. You know who's going to come here if Trent Baalke's a GM? Bill O'Brien.
Yeah.
Right? Robert Saleh. That's who you're going to hire, a guy like that. You're not going to get a Joe Brady or a Ben Johnson or even a Cliff Kingsbury or any of these guys. They're not going to come work for Baalke. And look, I don't know all the inner workings of how all this goes, but I do talk to enough people that tell me this stuff. I've never had any issue with Trent Baalke that he's been here. I think he's not done a very good job. I think he's personally made me look bad because I was kind of on the Baalke bandwagon, and that kind of blew up in my face. So I'm a little bitter about that. But I mean, I don't have anything personal against the guy. I just don't think he's been a very good general manager. But there are a lot of people in NFL circles, coaching related, that still don't like Trent Baalke. Like I had John Shipley on from Jaguars on SI, and he was telling me last week that he had a conversation with somebody in the coaching community. He didn't specify any more than that. And I don't blame him, but because he didn't want to out his source, but somebody in the coaching community, and he asked him about Baalke, and he's like, "Will that affect who the Jaguars could hire as a head coach if Baalke's here?" And his source said, "Absolutely. Baalke still has a very, very bad reputation among people, and obviously that stems back from his days in San Francisco." But yeah, I think that would drastically affect your coaching candidate list if Baalke were retained. I don't know why Shad Khan would retain him. Have zero idea why. But the more people you talk to, the more people think it's 50-50 Baalke goes, and they think it's 100% that Peterson's gone either tomorrow or in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Robert Lamison asked earlier, any update on Walker Little's injury? I just know they had an ankle injury and he left in the first half and did not return. It didn't seem super significant, but we'll find out more. I'm sure Doug will be asked about it. We'll probably get a real update tomorrow morning on both him.
I'll give you an update on Walker Little's injury. You want an update, Gus, on Walker Little's injury? Do not play him the rest of the year. All right.
Year, probably.
How about this? Anybody 26 and under that has 2 years or more left on their contract, if they have a hangnail over the next 2 games, I wouldn't play him. Because, I mean, the only bad things can happen now. Like, I mean, we'll update you on Walker Little's injury, but that's your starting left tackle next year. Do you want that guy hobbling out there at 80% on a bum ankle playing 2 meaningless games? Of course not. You want him 100% when hopefully you have a new coaching staff and a new GM in here in May, June, and July to get ready for a bounce back season in 2025. So, well, you're at the point now, man, where I would just, if Walker Little, when him hobbling off the field like that with 2 pointless games to go, I would not complain at all if we didn't see him again until offseason conditioning in April.
Yeah, I feel like my heart stopped when I saw Tyson Campbell go down. I think it was
Right.
multiple times he had injuries. He did bang up his shoulder. Yeah, it's brutal. Like, those are just two pillars of the organization. Even if you disagree with the deal that Walker Little got and don't think he's all that, like, he is being paid to be the left tackle of the future, and Tyson Campbell's being paid to be the top cornerback of the future. And so I think it's one thing for like rookies like Brian Thomas or Jarny Jones. I would expect them to finish out the season, obviously, but it becomes a real conversation when you have millions of dollars tied up into these recent extensions in Walker Little and Tyson Campbell. And even if the extensions weren't a big talking point, like, they're just two of the best players on the team and two of the most important positions. And so it definitely becomes a risk reward type of conversation going forward. To go back to the coaches real quick, I wanted to ask if you had any like non-Ben Johnson takes, or if your list is kind of similar to everyone else's, which seems to be Ben Johnson and then Liam Cohen and then like maybe a Mike Vrabel. I don't know if I'm missing anyone else super obvious. I know that Glenn out of Detroit is really popular too, but it just feels like Jackson will probably go with the offensive coach route.
Yeah, I was actually a Marcus Freeman guy for a little bit until he got that extension in South Bend. I thought that would have been a really interesting guy that not a lot of people had talked about. Marcus Freeman, the head coach at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I really like that guy, but he got that extension, so that doesn't look like it's going to happen. No, I think Ben Johnson, although there's a lot of Chicago talk surrounding Ben Johnson, we'll see what happens there. I like Liam Cohen. Joe Brady in Buffalo, I think, is a guy you probably need to look at. Bobby Slowick in Houston, some of the luster's off of him a little bit. I don't know what you think of Kingsbury, but what he's done in Washington with Jaden Daniels, I mean, look, he can't be worse than what the Jaguars have here. It's impossible to be worse than what the Jaguars have. I'm open to pretty much any suggestion at this point because, I mean, within reason. I probably wouldn't hire Rich Kotite or or a Bobby Petrino, but within reason, I'm open to anything because I don't think anything would be off the table because it'd be hard to be worse than losing 17 of your last 21 games, which is what the Jaguars have done here. 17 out of the last 21 times they've played football, they've lost. So that's the reality, man.
All right. Well, I've got one just outlandish take, I guess. What would you say if San Francisco said, we'll trade you Kyle Shanahan in exchange for your first round pick in 2025?
The number one overall pick?
Oh, it's right now it's projected to be number 2, but yeah, the Jaguars' first round pick, wherever it ends up being, for Kyle Shanahan, straight up.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't do that. I probably wouldn't do that. That would be crazy. Hey, look, Kyle Shanahan's a great coach.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That's interesting. I guess I hadn't really thought about that. I mean, if you're picking 13th, maybe. But you give me Liam Cohen, Travis Hunter, or Kyle Shanahan, I'm going to take Liam Cohen and Travis Hunter. You know what I mean? I think Ben Johnson, everybody wants Ben Johnson. He's going to be the prize, and I don't think that's going to happen here. Maybe it does, but I don't think so. It won't happen if Balky's a GM, I can tell you that. But if you tell me they hire Liam Cohen or they hire Joe Brady, I'd be totally fine with that at this point. Now, again, defensively too, everybody talks about the offensive guys. Well, look at Dan Quinn, right, and what he's done in Washington, an old-time defensive coordinator, and you look at what he's done there. You look at other guys around the league. D'Amico Ryans is another one. So we got to give the defensive guys some love. So Aaron Glenn, I think, is going to get a lot of love. The Lions DC. I know people love Jesse Minter, although a little of the luster's off of him. The Chargers DC. So I wouldn't be opposed to a defensive guy, but I just think with this nucleus of players, you got to go offense.
Yeah, someone asked in the comments who the offensive coordinator is in Minnesota. Apparently it's Wes Phillips, which I don't know why that name rings a bell, but it does.
Wade
I
Phillips
think they've also got I forget who the old like Jets backup quarterback was. He was in Carolina for a little bit too, and there's like some rumors about him taking the Texans head coaching job, but now that guy is the I can't believe I'm blanking on his name, but it's just a recent backup quarterback is the quarterback's coach in Minnesota. So I feel like that'd be a good tree to maybe pluck from. Um, Joshua Stewart saying if they go defense, Glenn or Flores. I'll be interested to see. I feel like Flores probably should be like the top coordinator available, like maybe even ahead of Ben Johnson, just because I think what he's doing this year in Minnesota is like he's not just getting more out of less in terms of the scheme versus talent in Minnesota, but he's also just doing it in a way that's like his defense is perfect against modern offenses, the way that they're able to blitz. So Josh McCown was who I was thinking of. Thank you.
Yeah, Josh McCown. The thing with Flores, and again, I don't want to get too deep into this because I don't want to speak out of turn. But again, I've talked to enough people that cover the league. Flores is going to be interesting to see if he ever gets another head coaching gig because
Right.
there are some people that are still upset about what he pulled in Miami within league circles. Um, and again, I don't want to speak out of turn. I just know I've talked to enough people that are curious if Flores will get another job as a head coach because the things he said in Miami did rub some people the wrong way.
No, that's totally fair. If you had to like pick out a perfect scheme specifically for Trevor Lawrence, is there one like off the top of my head that you can think of, especially with these incoming candidates? It's a little bit tough because Ben Johnson and Liam Cohen, I feel like they both definitely have roots from the Shanahan / McVay wide zone scheme, but they are really kind of mutts that like got a lot of information from a lot of different places. And so I don't know if there's honestly, I think Trevor is pretty like scheme dependent or independent. Like he can play in any offensive scheme, but I feel like one that's just really kind of air raidy or downfield takes a lot of throws downfield would probably be best for him. But I'm not sure like how that suits up in terms of the candidates that are available. Maybe Liam Cohen in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, look, I mean, when you talk about schemes and stuff, I'm probably not the right guy to ask. Here's what I do know. I'm tired of seeing 3-yard button hooks. I'm tired of seeing swing passes to the wide receiver that go east-west and not north-south. All right. I'm tired of, 4-yard hitches to Travis Etienne where he gets tackled right away. Here's a wild idea. You have a stud in Brian Thomas Jr. You go draft somebody in round 1 or 2, you go bring in a free agent, and you open this thing up a little bit. I mean, you look at the teams in the league right now, man. You look at the best teams in the league. Look what Detroit's doing on offense. Look at what Buffalo is doing on offense. Now, they lose Stephon Diggs. They lose Gabe Davis. They lose Mitch Morse. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because they have the quarterback and they have the play callers and they have the scheme. And it's just what's working, what has happened here has not worked. Again, you do not lose 17 of 21 football games if things are working. And Doug Peterson's at that podium right now talking about cleaning up the tape. We got to watch the tape, and I don't even care about the things he says anymore. I'm again, that's not an indictment of Doug. That's just the reality of losing 17 out of 21. It's just words at this point, man. Nothing ever gets cleaned up. Nothing ever gets fixed. The same thing happens every week. You go out there and you lose and you lose and you lose. And keep in mind, it's 17 out of 21 because Will Levis did not hit a wide open Chigakonkwo in the end zone in Nashville, or it would be 18 out of 21, right? So, I mean, the Jaguars just don't win games, and things need to change here, and hopefully they change very, very quickly.
Hopefully, indeed. Russell saying Brian Thomas needs a running mate on the other side to have a truly vertical offense. So I want to pose another hypothetical to you. Ted McMillan with the Jaguars' is first pick, or Will Campbell? Who would you rather see if they don't go with a defensive side of the ball?
Well, the thing with Will Campbell is they just paid Little and Harrison's a first-round pick, right? So, I mean, I love Will Campbell, but what are you going to do with Walker Little then? You just gave him 3 years, $45 million. Are you going to move him inside? I mean, you're not going to draft an offensive tackle in the top 5 and not play him next year. There's just no way that's going to happen. So when they did the Walker Little deal, that almost not hamstrung him necessarily, but I mean, he's your guy now because you're not going to pay a guy $15 million a year to not play him. So it's a slippery slope because taking wide receivers in the top 5 is a very questionable decision. Well, let me ask you. Let me turn it back on you. Are you a Travis Hunter guy? If the Jaguars pick second, the Giants go quarterback at 1, do you take Travis Hunter?
Yeah, I think he's probably the best player in the class. I don't think he's necessarily like a slam dunk number 1 pick that's like a can't miss guy and like you can't like consider trading back at all. And like there really should be a race to the number 1 pick. But I don't know. I'm definitely more of an NFL guy than a college football guy. I've seen probably like 1 Colorado game live this year, so I'm probably the wrong person to ask, especially now that we're in the middle of the season. I'll definitely have better draft related answers as we get closer to April. But to me, I kind of want one of the Michigan guys, assuming that they do end up out of the Travis Hunter sweepstakes and end up picking like say 4th overall or something. I would just want whoever they end up, whoever's higher on their board between Mason Graham or Will Johnson, who's a defensive tackle and cornerback respectively from the Wolverines. I think they're both clearly like championship caliber, have the right mentality, great football players, and so I'll be really happy with either one of them. But in general, I think the first round pick is definitely going to be interesting to talk about for this reason, but it's going to be like kind of hard to nail down for Jacksonville because I think whether or not Trent Baalke is retained, they really are going to be able to go with a true best player available type of approach because they do have a left tackle, a right tackle, a quarterback, 2 edge defenders, a cornerback in Tyson Campbell. Like they've got a wide receiver in Brian Thomas. They have a lot of premium positions already filled. So I think they're going to be able to go in a lot of different directions if they so choose. But I do hope that they, just generally speaking, really try to invest in the trenches because having franchise quarterback and Trevor Lawrence on the roster is great, but I don't think either side of the trenches is like really close to being Super Bowl contenders.
Well, here's the reality, too. They're not going to beat Indianapolis in Week 18. They don't win up in Indy normally when they're any good, and they're terrible this year, and Indy might be playing for something. So the only game you can win is next week against Tennessee. If they lose to Tennessee, which they could, right, very easily, they could lose to Tennessee, they might have the number 1 pick in the draft. At worst, they'll be picking second, right? So I think legitimately you can begin having that discussion about Travis Hunter. You can begin having that discussion about what do you do with the number 2 pick. You can begin having that discussion about trading down if somebody needs one of those quarterbacks, right? There's all sorts of possibilities if you lose to the Titans. Because, again, I don't think they have a chance of going to Indy and winning in Week 18. And based on what I've seen, I actually would be kind of surprised if they beat Tennessee. Tennessee, I think when they want to play well, they still have the potential to play well. I don't think Jacksonville can play very well right now. Just with all the injuries, keep in mind, the one game they've won in the last 2 months was 10-6 against Tennessee. The offense does nothing with Mac Jones. Absolutely nothing. So I bet if I were a betting man, I think that Jacksonville loses their next 2 games and probably is picking number 2 overall in the draft.
All right, let's play Guess That Line. I'm going to see if we have the line available for next week's game already between the Jaguars and the Titans. What do you think the spread for that one is?
I think it'll be Jaguars -3 because the home team gets 3, and they're basically calling it a pick 'em, but the Jaguars are at home.
Okay. It's loading for me now.
Because, I mean, it's 2 of the 3 worst football teams in the NFL. I mean, the Jaguars and the Titans are both awful.
Jags are 1.5-point favorites according to FanDuel, and the total is 39.5 points. So definitely projected to be another stink fest, and rightfully so.
So basically, FanDuel is saying Tennessee should be the favorites because if the home team gets 3, which is the common thought in the NFL, they're essentially saying the Titans are a 1.5 favorite, but the Jaguars are getting 3 for being at home.
Yeah, the Titans on a neutral field, the Titans would be 1.5-point favorites. That's correct, and so Titans are slightly expected to be, or slightly regarded as a better team according to just that betting line. But yeah, we'll see. I think it'll be another game that's kind of like 10-6 or 14-9, like we saw today. Something definitely in the teens, if not lower. But we've got just 2 more games left to go. That'll do it for us on today's post-game show, breaking down Jaguars-Raiders. We will not be back this week on Tuesday or Thursday because we're taking off for Christmas. But Hacker and I, as well as Mia and Tommy, will be back on next Sunday's show to break down Titans versus Jaguars. So thank you to everyone for joining. Hacker, you got anything else?
Yeah, man. Don't forget, Gus. This is big time. We got the fifth quarter tonight
I got the
on
fifth quarter.
1010
Yeah,
XL. Are you kidding me? I get to get in my car in 50-degree weather from Mandarin, drive to the radio station for a 9:30 to 11:30 postgame show to talk about this Jaguar-Raider contest, which will be something we remember for a long, long time, and to preview the 3-12 Jaguars hosting the 3-12 Tennessee Titans and what's going to be just an epic battle at Everbank Stadium. All kidding aside, I get to sit with Leon Searcy for 2 hours coming up here. That's hard to complain about. So join us 9:30 to 11:30 tonight as we reminisce about the Jaguars' latest loss. Again, Shad Khan tenure, 2012, the beginning, 63 wins now, and 100 and what are we? It's 210. So it's like 63 and 167. It's absolutely wild how many games they have lost since Shad took over the team. It's unfortunate.
It is. But yeah, check out the fifth quarter on 1010XL/92.5 with FM with Hacker. Again, we will be back next Sunday, but not on Tuesday or Thursday on this show. But thanks again to Hacker for joining me today. And all season long, really, I really appreciate you. Merry Christmas to you and the family. Merry Christmas and happy holidays to all of our listeners. Thank you guys. Have a good one. Well, take care.